is Richard Harrington. I'm a blogger as well as an author, and we are here today at South by Southwest taking a look at some of the things happening over in the interactive space. We're joined by Kimberly Blessing, who is a co-author of a new book called Adapting to Web Standards. Why is there the need for this book? What was really the motivation behind it?
Well, so I think what happened was a number of different authors who have worked on really large sites that have made successful conversions to web standards kind of came together and said, we need to document what we've done because there are other large companies out there where perhaps there are standards evangelists that are having trouble convincing their companies that they need to make this leap. I also think that there are some companies out there that are kind of struggling and need to know that there is success at, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, more or less. So kind of bringing together people who have been successful at this and documenting those experiences as a way to educate, encourage, and just document for others.
Now, many people when they hear standards think of it as a negative thing. What are some of the benefits of putting in good standards that are usable, effective? Describe some best practices or why a company should be doing this.
Well, I think the biggest benefit, especially when you're in the enterprise, that most companies see are the dollar signs. The fact that there's a lot of savings that come from the utilization of standards. If you take a website with about 1,000 web pages, and each page has been developed by a different coder, has been designed by a different designer, and none of them are adhering to any common set of best practices or standards, like you said, then you're essentially spending money for one-offs every single time you create a new product or a new page. And so ultimately to the big business, there's a lot of savings by establishing a set of standards, ensuring that your teams are following them, kind of having some kind of review process to ensure that, and then reaping the savings from that. Of course, there are benefits to the user on the opposite end. Once they access a website that's been consistently designed and coded, they're going to have a much better user experience, and it becomes much more simple to upgrade the website to ensure that other standards are supported in an ongoing fashion. So just for example, you mentioned accessibility. If today your website's coded in one common fashion, even if it has no accessibility features, to go back and add those in should be relatively simple because you're not looking at upgrading a completely different code base. You're looking at one common set of code that then just needs a couple of fixes.
Now, you've been in the trenches when it comes to standards for some fairly large companies.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's a resistance to standards? Not necessarily at the companies you worked with, but you've seen this. Why do people resist these?
I think that folks typically resist this for one of two reasons. Either they think that it's going to limit their creativity, or it kind of means that the man is,
right.
And I hate to use that term, but the man is kind of holding them down and telling them what to do. But I think that if you take a look at some of what those large companies are doing, in particular the technology-based companies, they've realized that they need to have this process, they need to have this documentation, and it becomes an essential part of being a quality technology company, of producing a quality website. And on the design front, when people feel like it's kind of boxing them in, I kind of put it in the way that you have to design a better box then. If this particular box is too constraining, in the next revision of those design standards, of those design patterns, what should the box look like next?
So do you really see that, I guess, for standards to be effective, it's not just top-down standardization? How does the whole team, or what should a company be doing to involve others in the creation of standards?
So I'm typically used to more of a grassroots kind of bottom-up approach to standards, where people who know about web standards typically come together first and say, hey, let's try to get the company on the same page. So when you start with that model, I think that first of all, you get very passionate people who want to collaborate. So right there, you're kind of removing any of the barriers because the people know they want to achieve success and they want to do something together. So I think that really helps in terms of making for a very successful process. And then what those folks typically have to do is evangelize and outreach and look for those key executives who they can then sell that message to. And then when those executives latch on, then it can really become kind of a top-down process change that then enforces standards throughout. If you start out with an executive or with some kind of top-down mandate to achieve standards, I think that's great. Sometimes what I've seen happen, though, is that it's kind of like forcing teams together. You have to come up with standards. You don't always get that same level of passion and commitment, and wanting to break down the boundaries. But if you can find the right team and the right leader for that team, it really shouldn't be much of a problem.
Now, we've talked about large companies. Is there room for use of standards for small developers, smaller teams? And if so, how does that help out?
I absolutely think that there's a place for standards for small teams. I'd say in the agency environment, especially with some of the smaller consultancies that are out there, where you maybe only have 3 to 5 people on a design or development team, typically what you want to do is still ensure that everybody is coding in the same manner. Just because you create a site today for a client doesn't mean that somebody else in the future won't have to come back and maintain it. And that typically won't be you. It could be somebody either with the company today or somebody who's not even yet with the company. So if you're all working against one common set of standards or set of principles for your design and development work, it should be really easy then to go back in later on, make changes, ensure that something new that's being developed is in line with the design aesthetic or with the coding structure, thus making it that much easier to share.
Last question for you. What's the one thing you've learned that really drives standards? If a group is having trouble getting it in place, what can they do to turn the corner to really get standards accepted?
I guess I would say it comes down to people. It's all about the people that are involved. And I guess I could say that I've seen teams that really do struggle where there's somewhat of dead weight on the team, somebody who isn't fully bought into the idea, isn't towing their part of the overall package, and that can be really difficult for a team. I think what has to happen in those cases is you have to have that really honest conversation. And even when it comes to evangelism, the best thing to do is to have that one-to-one conversation and convert each person, one at a time, rather than trying to talk to a really big audience and not being able to customize.
Thank you, Kimberly, for joining us. The book is Adapting to Web Standards. We're with Kimberly Blessing. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thanks, Rich.